Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I hope you're doing well. This week's Parsha is Vayikra. So we are starting the third book of the Torah, Vayikra, or Leviticus. So we've gone through the first book, Genesis, Bereshit, the second book, Exodus, Shemot, and now we are on the third. So now after Vayikra, we have Bamidbar, Numbers, and Dvarim, Deuteronomy. So we're like entering 3 out of 5. Crazy. Does not feel like we've reached that point in the year, but here we are. So we're starting the book of Vayikra. The book of Vayikra can be a little bit difficult for people to learn about because it's a lot of mitzvot, and it's a lot to do with things that we do in the Mishkan, in the temple, in the desert. The Mishkan, again, is the sort of temporary tabernacle that we had when we were traveling in the desert, versus the Beit HaMikdash, which is the permanent place that was in Jerusalem that we no longer have. So in this parsha, we learn a lot about korbanot, sacrifices. The word korban comes from the Hebrew word lahit karev, or karev, karav, like drawing close to. Korbanot, lahit karev, drawing close to, which refers to be drawing close to God. When do we make sacrifices? People make sacrifices when they're repenting for something. They're atoning for something that they did. And sacrifices are weird. They involve killing animals, and they involve some kind of gross parts about like taking certain parts of the animal's body and burning it and doing other things. It's very weird. It's very hard for us to understand. It's not the first thing you want people to be reading about when they're studying Torah, but when children are first learning the Torah, they start with Vayikra. There's a few different reasons. The first one is that maybe it's the most difficult one to learn about. So if you start with that, if you start finding the beauty, even though it's a difficult one to learn about, maybe you learn to do that with the rest of the Torah when we're in fun parshiot. And the second thing is that children are the most pure. They don't have sins to atone for. And so therefore we start in the area of the Torah that talks about purifying ourselves with the ones that are the most pure children. Nice idea. So there's one particular part of the korbanot, the sacrifices, that is particularly distasteful. This is the part involving the blood of the animal. So when you bring in a sacrifice, you bring in, let's say it's a cow, you're supposed to put your hands on it. It's supposed to be, cut in a way that its blood drains, the blood drains out, it's caught, and then the priests like splatter the blood on the altar, which is just like this like sort of flat thing. So what the heck? That is a lot and gross, and I don't want people reading about that. So there's a lot of commentary and a lot of explanation as to what's the deal with blood? What is so, first of all, gross, but secondly, why is this the thing? This is not the first time that we've thrown blood on something. So when we got the Torah at Mount Sinai, Moshe comes down, he reads from the covenant, a book of the covenant, Sefer HaBrit, which is said to contain some parts of the Torah. And he then says to the people, do you take on these commandments? And the people say, yes, Naaseh v'nishma, we will do, and then we will listen. We all of that God tells us we will do. Moshe sacrifices some cows and splatters their blood on the people. What the heck? I never learned. What? Okay, let's just like back up a little bit. Do you know that we, in the laws of kashrut, we are not allowed to drink blood of animals? Why? I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but the commentary and the explanation is that the life of an animal is in its blood. The nefesh, the soul, exists in the blood. So we shouldn't be eating it because it's not right to take away, to eat the lifeblood of something. Interesting. Also, the phrase lifeblood. Why do we then splatter blood? What's the special thing there? Well, also in the same way that blood, it represents the soul, it also represents the soul in a situation of sacrifices. So we splatter this blood, and we're supposed to recognize that this animal, the same blood this animal has, the same blood that was rushing through this animal's body that was keeping it alive at every second, is the same blood that we have. It is incredible that our bodies work, that blood literally fills every single inch of us. You get a tiny cut, you bleed. It is the full, like we're just like full of it. If we didn't have blood, we wouldn't get oxygen. We wouldn't be able to fight against diseases. And we have red blood cells that can't travel oxygen all around. There are white blood cells protect us against they repair things when we get hurt. And if we didn't have blood, we would be just shells of humans. So it's important that we have blood. It also represents how vulnerable we are. When we see the blood of another animal, of something else, we recognize how precious and incredible it is that we exist, and that is divine. You can't do anything about whether your blood enters the right organs and sends the right amount of this to that. Like, we have no control of that. You can try to live a healthy life, you can try to do things that are good, but at the end of the day, that is divine. That our bodies work in this insane way, that every single inch of us knows exactly what to do, and that every single part of us flows and does all the right things. crazy. So when we see the blood of an animal, when the people on Mount Sinai, at the bottom of Mount Sinai, were splattered with blood, they recognize the vulnerability of human life and that we owe it all to God. There's so much divinity in our lives. So how can we relate to that today? Because we don't have the Mishkan, we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, we don't make sacrifices. But if we think about how precious our life is, we can too become closer to God. We can become karov, close to God, like we would with korbanot. When we recognize that our lives are fragile and vulnerable, and that we truly live divine lives, we can become close to God. So I hope that idea connects with you, and I'll see you all next week.